All right. We'll wait for everyone to get in the room, our Zoom room, and we'll go ahead and get started. We are very excited for today's presentation with Mary Poskin, and this is going to be just very, very interesting. But first, I want to give you a few updates and announcements in regards to NAMI Johnson County. Can you guys see my screen as like a full screen? Okay, cool. Um, my name is Kelly Jackson. I'm the executive director here at NAMI Johnson County, and our job here is to improve the lives of people who have been impacted by mental illness. And we do that through a number of different ways. We offer support through our free support groups. We do a lot of education in our community through our classes and our presentations, and then, of course, advocacy when it comes to anybody who deals with someone who has a mental health condition. And so that usually ranges from our school districts to our police officers, our court systems, and things like that. So that is what we do really in a nutshell. But we have a few great upcoming events I want to share about that are really exciting for us. The first one is our Sharing Hope initiative. And we are so excited to really kick off Minority Mental Health Month in July with offering 4 Sharing Hope conversation series. And what they are is this is mental health conversations in the Black community to really address unique needs and cultural issues regarding mental health care. And so this is going to be a fantastic opportunity to start these conversations in our communities. And we are looking forward to this. We have some incredibly trained leaders that are ready to go. And so these will be launched in July. Look for it on our website. We're going to start placing those registrations open. So if you're interested in joining a Sharing Hope conversation series, those will be opening within the next week so that you can register and be a part of those conversations. We also have our book club, and this is just a wonderful group of people that meet and discuss a mental health book club or a mental health book every 2 months. This next one is called The Glass Castle, and that will be offered, or that is by Jeanette Walls. It is a fantastic group. So grab the book, make sure you read it. They usually do memoirs. And so these are personal stories, which is kind of the heart of NAMI, is that lived experience, what it's like to live with a mental health condition and love someone with a mental health condition. And so that will be July 21st. We offer that at Church of the Resurrection in Overland Park. Um, our next event is Dink Out the Dark. This is our pickleball tournament and benefit concert from the Zeros. It is a fun day at Chicken and Pickle in Overland Park where we raise funds for suicide prevention in our community. And this is going to be on September 28th. It's an afternoon. The tournament will be at 1, and then at 4 o'clock, the Zeros will do a benefit concert on the rooftop bar. And those tickets are on sale if you wanted to either play pickleball or grab a t-shirt or be at the concert. That QR code can help get you there. We also have a ADHD event for our educators, helping represent those children who live with ADHD and how to manage them in the classroom. We are really excited to have Dr. Kristen Stupi out. She is a pediatrician at Pediatric Partners and is the outgoing president of ADHD KC. She is an incredible voice for ADHD, and so she is going to lead this at Johnson County Community College for our educators. This is a free event. We will be serving dinner. Registration is there at that QR code. And please spread the word. This is going to be a fantastic event. And then last but not least, we just recommend you visit our website. Some of the easiest ways to get a hold of us is by using that contact us button or the calendar to find the information in regards to the events I spoke about or anything new and upcoming that will be happening in the next few months. But that is just a quick update of what's happening in NAMI for the next few months, and I'm going to turn it over to Vicki Meek.
Thanks, Kelly. And Mary, thank you for being here. And I must make a really good claim to let you know that Mary's a good friend, and I also is an excellent colleague. I worked with Mary with nursing students. So Mary, currently, and Mary, you'll need to tell me, how close are you to being Dr. Poskin?
I should graduate in December, this coming December.
I
so
knew
very close.
I know, it's so close. I'm so excited. We're going to go out and celebrate. So I'm delighted to introduce Mary. Mary is, as she just mentioned, a PhD student, soon to be completing that course of study as she continues on. and the great things that she does. She currently teaches undergrad nursing courses in community health and evidence-based practice at Rockhurst University. She also has taught in OB, and she's taught research, so a variety of fields that Mary touches. And her trajectory in nursing and in her nursing career goes across many fields. She's worked for non-for-profit teaching hospitals. She precepts community health nursing students in underserved areas, and she's also been involved very much in volunteer work within the community. And probably what you will see, I think it tells you everything. Her title for her presentation is long, but it really does tell you what her goals are in regards to her piece when she's been working with her PhD. So Mary, her title is "I Wish I Didn't Have to Walk on Eggshells All the Time," which is so true for all of us in many ways, right? You could just stop there, Mary, with that title, and we could go all different directions with that title. But it's the beliefs and practices of physical and mental health in young adults who identify as transgender or gender diverse and experience unstable housing. So she really has done a lot of research and contact with the LGBTQIA plus community and experiences they've had in housing instability, and also how to improve their health, their mental health and physical health. Mary has three. We always ask our speakers, what are 3 questions you hope that anybody who's listening to this, and I think, and Kelly did mention we are recording this, so Mary, other people can get on. This is a really busy time of the year, so we don't have as many on here as we would like, but I'm telling you, the ones we have on here are mighty. So they're great. But the 3 questions that Mary hope after this presentation that you will be able to answer is, what are the important issues surrounding the physical and mental health of young adults who identify as transgender or gender diverse and experience unstable housing? And I think you're going to be probably surprised at some of the things that Mary's going to be able to tell you about that issue for this population. Number 2, what practices are used to promote physical and mental health in this population and how they can be supported? And the third question that she hopes that you will be able to have more information on and be able to answer once her presentation is over is, what types of resources do young adults who identify as transgender or gender diverse and experience housing instability believe would be the most beneficial in promoting their well-being? So basically, my phone's ringing, sorry about that. So basically, what are the important issues surrounding this population? What practices are used to promote their physical and mental health? And what types of resources are available to them? And how do they access those resources and benefit by those? So Mary, I'm going to stop babbling and let you take over, but I'm thrilled to have you here. So thank you for joining us.
Well, Vicki, thank you so much for having me. I am so grateful to all of you for letting me be here today and share this information. I just have to mention, Vicki was and still is my mentor. So I adore Vicki. So thank you so much. And I'm grateful for this platform, and I'll go ahead and get started. I'll start sharing my screen here. And I'll just say though, that is such a mouthful. You're right. It is a mouthful. But part of that is to really try to have, when we're talking about this population, to really try to have people first verbiage. We don't want to set, it's really kind of thinking about how we word things is so important. And we'll talk about that more as we go along. But let's see here if this will let me advance. Can you guys see this next picture?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I just want to give a little bit of background, and actually some of the images I'm going to have today are from Pride Haven, and this is a shelter for LGBTQIA plus folks who are experiencing housing instability. And unfortunately, they had to close due to financial concerns last August, but for the last 5 years or so, I have volunteered in the summers at Pride Haven, and I really became accustomed and aware of Pride Haven, the shelter, due to what Vicki was talking about with my nursing students. We were doing some community service and became aware of Pride Haven, and I started volunteering there in the summers. And I was so struck by, for one thing, just how common housing instability is in the LGBTQIA plus population. And also, just as I was there, how amazingly resourceful, resilient, and challenged these folks are. And this really kind of inspired me then when I was interested in pursuing my PhD. I thought, I know exactly what I want my dissertation topic to be about, because I don't feel like as a nurse that we know enough and we're sharing enough information about some of the challenges in this population. And what I wanted to do today is, Becky and I've talked about, I can't really see the screen if you guys have questions, so please feel free to ask me questions. But my plan was to just share with you kind of the background of, for this population, the research study that I conducted, and some of the results of that study, and just recommendations for practice and for families and for our communities that I would have. And then I thought we could kind of, I have time for questions at the end as well. But just a little bit of a background, and I know we all kind of can maybe be coming to this from different spaces and places, but as a community health instructor and nurse, I really wanted to approach what I was seeing at Pride Haven and what I was seeing in our community from the social determinants of health. And that's the environment where we live, work, go to school, and age. And many of you may have heard of these. There are these 5 different areas. You know, it used to be we really thought that someone's mental and physical health was based upon so much of their genetic background, their physical and mental health practices, and what happened in with their therapist and what happened in the doctor's office. And we've kind of come to understand and recognize that over 80% of our health, and by the way, like for our purposes today, when I'm talking about health, I'm talking about mental and physical health. 80% of our health outcomes are really based on these social determinants of health. And that's education access and quality, healthcare and quality, the neighborhood and built environment we live in. And that could be, you know, grocery stores, safety, lots of different components there. In our case, it's going to be talking about housing stability. Also, the social and community context. Are there wonderful resources like NAMI in the community that we live in? Are there places that people can go that they can feel connected? Or conversely, is there discrimination? Is there bias? These things impact folks' health, as well as economic stability, and that's closely related to these other factors. So this is how I approached this study. And I know that for young adults, and by young adults, I'm really looking at folks who were 18 to 25 years old, because we really kind of see this population as they are still developing. There are still a lot of developmental things that are happening, but yet they can be independent. So young adults that identify as transgender or gender diverse, we recognize they're a very susceptible population and they're underreported. The Pew Research Center recognized, when they did a large survey, about 5.1% of adults who are less than 30 identify as transgender or non-binary. And so, and the terminology for trans and non-binary and gender diverse, it is pretty fluid, depending upon the folks you're talking with and the part of the country you're in. But basically, you know, if you're transgender, your assigned sex at birth is not what you identify as. So It might be you were born and assigned as a female at birth, but you've never really felt like you were a female. And if you were a trans male, then that means you now identify as a trans male. Or if you're non-binary, you really don't subscribe to male, only a male or female as a gender identity. You could be gender diverse, you could say gender queer, gender fluid. There's a lot of different ways these can be described. But it's a higher number than what many people have thought for a long time. And that could be people are getting more comfortable reporting. It could be that there is more language that really describes how folks feel about themselves. But I just wanted to make you aware. And of this population, almost 40% experience housing insecurity or housing instability at some point. With this specific piece and portion of the LGBTQIA plus population being the highest. Housing insecurity is really a housing and a public health issue. When we think about the social determinants of health, we recognize that housing instability is a huge issue for folks to really be able to have optimal health. And so the longer one experiences housing instability, the more likely they'll become chronically homeless, and then the more negative mental and physical health outcomes that can come from that. There are a lot of different factors here. And then young adults who identify as transgender or gender diverse, and that's what that TGD is from here on out. It's kind of for transgender and gender diverse. They experience housing instability. They have higher mental and physical health concerns, violence, and substance abuse compared to their peers. So, and when I'm talking about mental health concerns that we really see escalated, the anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, self-harming behaviors, PTSD, and substance use are very high in this population. And again, those social determinants of health, we see how for this population, we might have several factors really contributing to this poor health outcomes, whether that's housing insecurity, economic instability, healthcare access, and educational opportunities. All of these things can be impacted in a negative way, in addition to that discrimination, bias, and homophobia. So it is a very impacted community. How folks in this community may find themselves insecure with their housing, it could be that they are in a hostile home or school environment. And so they feel like for them to be safe, they need to seek some type of different shelter, whether that's, and by the way, when I'm talking about housing instability, I really have used what the government defines as what HUD defines as housing unstable. And that's where it could be that you couch surf, you stay with friends, but you don't have a stable, really consistent place that you know you can lay your head down at night. So it could be you're couch surfing, it could be you're at a shelter, you could be living in your car, you could be living in a place that's really not meant for habitation, like a boarded up building. There are lots of different ways to be housing unstable. Or maybe you have a landlord that when they find out your gender identity, they kick you out. They could be kicked out of their familial home, or maybe they age out of foster care. They may have mental health conditions, very severe mental health conditions, or this discrimination that they may identify with as far as that they've experienced being transgender, that may limit them seeking those types of supportive resources that may have helped them not be housing insecure. So it's all very interrelated. Their employment opportunities might be very limited. For one thing, if your housing situation is unstable, it is very hard to be able to focus on finding a job, or if you don't have a consistent address for your employer. So a lot of times they want that consistent address. Maybe you can't really keep yourself clothed and clean as you should be able to for a lot of housing job positions. The social stigma and discrimination, again, some employers will not hire these folks. And then they also have an increased risk of engaging in survival sex. The longer someone's homeless, the more likely they may be in engaging in survival sex. And then your healthcare access may be very limited. And we've already recognized that this is a population that has the highest rate of mental health concerns, sexually transmitted infections, and substance use. So there are a lot of things that are conspiring in a very negative way. When I looked at this, when I was thinking about this study, because I really wanted to make sure that as much as I could, that this was very impactful and really contributed to some health practices. There was very limited research, and from a nursing perspective, there really wasn't a nursing perspective that when we think about how many folks who are in this population, and nurses are like, we're the largest group of healthcare professionals. So nurses need to have more of awareness here. And then a lot of the research that I was seeing was really focused more on health deficits. I mean, it's very important to recognize that this population has significant mental and physical health concerns, but I was seeing another side of Pride Haven. I was seeing folks who really saw their future in front of them and could verbalize that. And they had a lot of hope towards their future. So I felt like we really, when we really needed to think about what we could be doing to also support their strengths and what we could be doing to communicate this information to all the people that this population would come in contact with, including NAMI folks. So initially I did an integrative review, and that was just looking at a larger population, not just the transgender and gender diverse population, but the LGBTQIA plus, that general umbrella on this topic, really looking at what were folks doing to promote their physical and mental health who were experiencing housing instability, because it is so common. And this was looking at all the literature and all the disciplines. And I did find 18 articles, and there were some themes or results that I recognized from that I'm not going to get into this really deeply, but it really supported, again, this gap that I wasn't seeing. There were 2 articles that mentioned the transgender, gender diverse population within this discussion. And I really was recognizing that this is the most hard-hit population, and it's bigger than what people recognize. I really saw a need for this study. And transgender and gender diverse folks, we are seeing more research for this population, which is really exciting, but they often are invisible in research. They're usually lumped with other groups. And the cultural differences for someone who identifies as transgender or gender diverse, there are differences in how they identify and how they navigate the world sometimes. And that can make differences in how they receive and integrate information. And I felt that was important to recognize. And this is the cultural group, again, they most commonly experience discrimination and exploitation. And then when you consider if you are someone in this population and you also happen to be Black, and we recognize if you're experiencing housing instability, there is some poverty. It's not often, not always, but often involved. You have that intersection of those things too that make this even more difficult for this population. And this is an image from Pride Haven. They have the opportunity there to really have different ways of expressing themselves. And this was just some word art that they had on their refrigerator. And I thought it was perfect to really just kind of define again, because I really want what I'm talking about today, to be in the words of this population and not my words as much as possible. And just to see here how they have, and fight through the time. He get the lady. just really that desire to continue in their lives, to lead productive lives. Um, Nobody liked to get hurt, climb alone, stop falling. I mean, this word art is so consistent with the conversations I have with folks. So the purpose, and I think Vicki has already read these research questions. These are really what I was looking to answer with this study. And um, in this case, this was a qualitative study, meaning because there were such minimal information on this topic up to this point, it was really important to do a qualitative study where we are really hearing the words of the study population because we don't know enough to really ask those large survey type questions. So this was a small qualitative study really focused on a specific cultural group, in this case, transgender or gender diverse folks who were experiencing housing instability. And I really try to focus on more of a health perspective and promotive health as well. Like, what are you doing that's working for you to promote your mental and physical health? Initially, the setting for the study was going to be at Pride Haven. And then when I got my study approval, I found out like a week later that Pride Haven had to shut their doors. So I moved the study to online as well to try to recruit folks online. Um, and I conducted the studies over Zoom, just like this, and we would conduct them that way. And I just want to say here that the IRB approval, just that this was basically the school. Duquesne is the school that I go to as I'm enrolled in my doctorate program, and Rockhurst IRB is where I work. And so just to make sure that these studies were ethical, that we maintained confidentiality, all of those things, it was very important. But what I was really hoping to do, the impact that I would like to have happen is to get the missing voices and cultural insights. And this is my abbreviation for young adults who identify as transgender or gender diverse and have experienced housing instability. I wanted to hear their voices and their concerns. And then add a nursing perspective with many opportunities and recommendations and how we could engage and support and intervene for this population. And also then to inform future health promotion efforts and how we could potentially try to address things upstream before someone has experienced this housing instability or discrimination and bias, and downstream after someone's already experienced these things and they're experiencing housing instability. What are some of the things that would be helpful to support them? And just very quickly with the study portion, I recruited folks. I used flyers and I put those in. I had flyers that I posted about the study in places that I knew that just from being at Pride Haven, where this population used, whether that be public libraries, some coffee shops and bars, vape shops. I talked with the gatekeepers, like folks in the community that I had worked with that I knew worked with this population, that they could share information, word of mouth, and also snowball methods. So if someone heard about the study, they participated in it, and they had a friend that they thought might be interested, they could share the information with them as well. And the goal with this type of study is 20 to 50 participants, and you go until you get data saturation, until you're not hearing new information and new perspectives. And my inclusion criteria was 18 to 25-year-olds. They'd experienced those different types of housing instability that I mentioned within the last year. They identified as either transgender or gender diverse. They were able that for the purposes of my study, they had to have some type of internet access, whether that was at the library or on their phones, and they had to be able to read and speak English. And exclusion criteria were if they didn't meet those criteria, the inclusion criteria. And this I'm just going to go through very quickly, but I just want you to be aware that for qualitative studies, even though it's a lot of talking with people and interviewing people. There's a very specific methodology that you follow. And so I had a demographic form that I would get the demographics for participants, and then an informed consent form. We did these online interviews with Zoom, and they lasted usually about an hour. And participants were compensated at $25, Amazon gift card that they could use anywhere. And that was really to compensate them for their time and their expertise. And then I had a semi-structured interview guide, and I'll show you those questions. They're very open-ended because I really didn't know the direction the interviews would go, because again, this is really trying to find the words and the concerns and the topics of the participants. So I had a trans physician and a nurse that identified as trans, and some folks who worked in the community who had experienced housing instability and were part of the LGBTQ community. But they looked at my interview guide too, just to see if we were on the right track. And then I would also I had the interviews, but then I also took notes, and that contributed to the data too. And then I had a very specific data analysis pattern I had to follow in the in vivo application, where I would code things. Then I'd look for patterns that I might see, and from the patterns I could identify themes. These are some of the open-ended questions that I started with, and really these were modified somewhat based upon what the participants, how they responded, and what I could tell they really wanted to talk about. But I always would make sure I ended it with, is there anything else you'd like for me to know, to make sure we really covered everything, and is there anything you'd like to ask me about? But it was really guiding along those lines of housing instability, mental and physical health topics and concerns. What do you think are important physical and mental health issues? It was that type of thing. And my results I want to talk about, but I have this image again. This is from Pride Haven. When you would walk into the kitchen area of Pride Haven, one of the first things you saw was, if you're a black sheep, welcome to the flock. And honestly, this sign always made an impression on me, and the results certainly support this, that folks, all of us need this, but especially if you are really discriminated and there's a lot of stigma against you in society, we need a place that we feel safe and we feel like we can be heard. And that's really one of the big things that came out of this. I have here, this is a very busy slide. This is the demographics, and I'm going to read off here kind of a little bit more specific. I can summarize this for you. I ended up having 21 participants. After about 19 study participants, I noticed that I was really hearing a lot of the same information. I wasn't hearing new perspectives or new concerns. So then I went ahead and I conducted 2 more study interviews just to confirm that I had reached data saturation, or really wasn't getting new information. And the average age of my study participants was, the range was between 20 and 25 years old. And of these folks, for those who, just to clarify the question of what sexuality were you assigned at birth, 15 of the study participants had been assigned female and 6 had been assigned male. And then what their current gender identity, what they reported that as. And you can see here the range from, from someone who said they were assigned female at birth and now they identify as male, to non-binary, trans male, genderqueer, non-binary, gender diverse, gender fluid. There was a real range there. And I also use the terminology current because these are 18 to 25-year-olds. And this can be fluid and can change. And then sexuality, we see, again, a range of sexual identities. And then in regards to race and ethnicity, I had 3 folks who identified as Asian, 4 Black, 2 Hispanic and Latino, 10 white, and 3 mixed race. And so and this is pretty consistent with how this population represents for housing instability. So this was consistent. Education rates were from less than high school all the way to graduation degrees, or I'm sorry, graduate degrees. And I had one participant who was completing their PhD program as well. Work situations range from not employed but looking to employed full-time. And this might have been somebody, the employed full-time can be someone who, if they'd had experienced housing instability within the past year, might be that now they have full-time employment and are more stably housed, but they were still eligible. That there was quite a range. And of these folks, 13 of them had some type of insurance, whether that was private insurance, Facebook, the marketplace, or it might have been Medicaid, and 8 people had no insurance. The states that people came from ranged from, there were 5 from Kansas, 8 from Missouri, and then the remaining, let's see, that would be, I have to think about this, 13, that would be 8. The remaining, they were primarily from the Northeast. I had some folks from Virginia and New York, from the East Coast, and then Southern states. I had Texas, and I guess I had an Indiana as well, but Tennessee. So they were kind of a range there. And I will say too, as I'm looking back at this, you can see how some of my participants, as I got farther down, they kind of would say East Coast. That I definitely saw with my recruitment that when I started this study last fall, and I completed the recruitment and actually interviewing folks in February. And in January, after we had our new administration, I had a much more difficult time with recruitment. And folks really did not feel as comfortable sharing what state they were from, which was understandable. I mean, these folks really kind of have gone underground more. And that was something I saw and I think is of note. So after I had coded those interviews, looked for patterns among the codes, and then from the patterns really tried to recognize themes. There were 4 themes that I recognized. And I'm going to read you the theme, and then I have examples in the words of the study participants. And what I had, well, the first theme was past trauma, discrimination, fear, and mental health concerns have contributed to youth who identify as transgender and gender diverse experiencing housing instability. The first person, well, this wasn't the first person, it's the first example I have here. I've been housing insecure since I was about 5 or 6. The interesting thing about that is that was my sister and I were, our family was not, if that makes sense. So we grew up in an abusive household. We often had to sleep outside at parks and 24-hour grocery stores, just finding places to sleep. And that was starting, I was 5 or 6. So I'm very familiar with like all the forms of housing insecurity. So there were plenty of folks who grew up either in homes that were not stable or they'd experienced generational poverty, and housing instability was not something new to them. And then there was also this middle case where there were some folks who said my parents disowned me before I came out as trans when they came out as queer. And so I never had anybody to co-sign on a lease. A lot of apartments require that you make 3 times rent. I couldn't afford 3 times rent. I didn't have any money. I needed somebody to co-sign and ended up getting a really shitty apartment that broke all the time because I couldn't. Yeah, I didn't have parents. So there were quite a few folks that they were kicked out, and that was part of their path to housing instability. If you're an 18 to 25-year-old and you don't have those resources, this happened. And then this final example, I was in residential treatment earlier this year. And during that time, I kind of was diagnosed with PTSD this past November and realized that my parents were not, because I was in college and then I had to drop out to go to residential treatment. There's a long story there. So these were some examples of how we saw that path. The second theme I saw was self-acceptance and resilience enable youth who identify as transgender, gender diverse to value their physical and mental health and seek care from affirmative healthcare providers and resources too, I would say. As far as physical health is concerned, I'm not a binary trans person. I'm a non-binary trans person. So again, this is that person who they don't identify as trans male, trans female. They are on a continuum. And that's really, really individual-like. It's super different for everyone. I don't take hormones. I feel I didn't used to, but now I feel very comfortable with myself and don't feel as a desire to change. So I don't take hormones right now. What important information I would like you to know about myself is that I'm a survivor. I've gone through a lot, and then I've been able to scale through despite the hurdles and the obstacles I've had to face. When I choose this, my present gender identity, so I would love to use myself as an example, or maybe kind of a role model to others that may be experiencing what I went through or may experience it in the future. So I think I would like to know, or I'd like you to know, that I'm a survivor. And this final person said, and I think, especially as a trans person, like it's kind of intimidating going to doctors because you don't know if one doctor will respect your pronouns and stuff like that. But there's a few like clinics and stuff like that who are very like LGBTQ friendly and stuff like that. And I thank God every day, like I have that support I need. So you definitely saw folks really, that self-acceptance and resilience just is made such an impression on me throughout, and how important that support is. The third theme was to promote self-care. Youth who identify as transgender and gender diverse desire and seek safe spaces, support, and belonging. So this first person said it. So if I'm being honest, I would say the shelter has been a source of an improvement of my mental health because I finally found a family or a home where I'm not being discriminated against or been judged for my gender or my gender identity. So the shelter has also been a kind of therapy for me. Then I'm glad I'm there. This was from a young person who I can picture them on their cot in their homeless shelter. Parents had kicked them out and they had reached out to their aunts and uncles for housing until they could figure things out. And they'd reached out to their grandparents and no one would take them in. So they went to a homeless shelter, which homeless shelters is affirmative and friendly as they can be. They are not easy places to be in. And this person saw such an improvement in their mental health and their happiness because they were in a space they were accepted for who they were. The second person says, feeling like I can exist as trans me, acknowledging and celebrating. That has made me a lot happier. And it's no longer like a big stressor. When I was younger and it was something, I was thinking about that all the time. It was something kind of in the back of my mind. But it wasn't until I felt like I finally had some stability that I felt like I could finally think about it and come to terms with it and actually come out as transgender. And now I feel like I know more of who I am. I'm a lot happier. And that's just one less thing I have to worry about. So having that safe space to actually be able to think about it and process it. And then this last person, I wanted to bring up another place that I heard folks talk about having belonging and support was online, their online resources. And this person said, I struggle making friends in person. So one of my best friends is actually someone like that I met online, and they live in New York, and it's crazy. And this actual person that I'm quoting here lives in Kansas City. They actually offered to let me stay with them and get this apartment. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. But I have friends, I'm like, whenever I didn't have money for food or anything, when I was staying at a friend's house, my online friends will send me money for food. Sometimes they've done it like 4 or 5 times. Yeah. And then the final theme is easily accessible and culturally sensitive resources are required to support the kinship, housing, employment, and health needs of youth who identify as transgender, gender diverse, and experience housing instability. This person says, the only reason I may have reservations concerning seeking mental health is if I don't trust the mental health provider, if I don't trust the person, if I don't trust that maybe he can maintain our discussions confidential, if you can maintain confidentiality. So confidentiality is a major factor for me. Whenever I'm thinking for a mental health provider, I have to be sure using your track records or maybe recommendations from others that you're a person that is able to maintain confidentiality. that you're not kind of a judgmental person. You are a listener. If you relate to some of my experiences, even better. And this particular person, they went on to talk about, this was a Black trans person who was like, if you've experienced housing instability, or if you're my same race, that's really helpful too. This next person said, I'd say like if I knew better, if I knew maybe either better budgeting skills, job options, or knew about cheaper housing options for low income people a lot sooner, I think I would have been able to avoid my current situation. Online, as well as maybe if at youth shelters, put all the information into one place online. And this is something I'll talk about more later, but this was one of the biggest things, is share resources. And the resources should be easy to access, and share them in as many different ways as you can. And I think about how you guys would, just so important in that regard. Thank you for that work. And then this person said, I was just going through a lot, and I just wish at that point in time there was a place where I could feel like there's a mentorship program, or more like a mentorship program where I could just go and see like, okay, people that have gone through this are like giving testimony or something like that. It would have uplifted me. It would have like motivated me in. And Becky, again, I was thinking about when you were talking about that clubhouse model, Nami, that's the sort of thing that can do so much important work. I'm just going to talk really quickly about, the limit that I want to recognize.
Mary, this is Vicki. Can I interrupt just real quick?
Please.
Just say, because it's on my mind as I'm listening to these points that your participants brought out, but also the black sheep and welcome to the flock. I read a book, Sitting Pretty, and it's on disabilities and challenges, both physical and mental, but it was a book discussion. It was a local author. If you get a chance, read the book. It's a great book, but and it's easy to read. But so it was a discussion. So we had a variety of people in there, but the one person that I just can't get my mind, I have not forgotten, and she really gave me just a real insight. But she was a transgender, trans from male to female. So she was talking about that experience. And what she said is, when I was born male, she says, when I was a male, I wasn't comfortable with myself, my body. I wasn't comfortable. Now that I've trans to trans female, people around me aren't comfortable with me. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a simple statement, but it gave me so much things to think about with that. And it just, when I'm reading those testimonies and what these people are talking about, it just makes me realize that, simple things that can make a difference as we're dealing with all different types of people with all different types of challenges, which includes all of ourselves, right? So I will let you continue. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for sharing.
I would have forgotten.
That is a wonderful soundbite right there. And it's so important because honestly, when you really look at all the mental health issues for this population, and every person is so unique and they have their own individual circumstances, but the more you look at this information, you really see how a lot of anxiety and depression and concern that I recognize there are individual scenarios, but a lot of it is not being accepted by the culture you live in. And to your point, if a lot of these young adults would talk to me about, I knew for a long time that it wasn't right. Who society saw me as was not right. And that's not who I knew I was. And that's why you kind of hear of these folks, then once they're in a setting where they're accepted for who they are, they feel so much better. They can be so much happier, but then society doesn't accept them. So I think the more education and the more awareness that we can bring to this population for all of us, the more important, that's so important. And I just want to recognize, speaking of, I'm looking at these limitations. I want to recognize here that I am an outsider. As when I think about the limitations of this study, I don't identify as trans. I'm heterosexual, and I've not experienced housing instability. So I have that outsider perspective. So that's one of the limitations of this study. I certainly talked with lots of folks and had them guide me with the process, but you know, it will be great when we get more and more folks who have that insider perspective. I certainly spend a lot of time with this population, but I just want to point that out. And recruitment and community member participation. There were folks that I'm sure did not feel comfortable participating in this study and chose not to. And then the technology and language limitations. If you don't have internet access, whether it's yourself personally through your phone or going to the library, you weren't able to participate in this study. And if you don't speak English or read English, you weren't able to participate in this study. But I'm sorry I've gone on, and I want to get to these my recommendations would be, and just what your discussions too. But first off, what can we do? And this is again in the words of one of the study participants. What can we do? What would be helpful is if people do not stigmatize or do not discriminate. If people were not homophobic, people don't spread hate when it comes to transgenders, because we are human too, and we tend to do what we like. It's just like people who have different dishes. I like cheese and you may not like it. So I like being trans and people like being straight. So I don't know why people just leave us, or why they don't just leave us alone. So I think initially what I would recommend is that we do our own self-assessment wherever we are, understanding what our own beliefs are, what our own values are, and what our practices are. We have to understand first who we are and where we come from before we can really help and advocate and ally and speak for others. And then we also want to expand public educational programming. Exactly what Vicki was just talking about, like people around this person are not comfortable with them. They're comfortable with themselves now, but people around them aren't. So how education helps people become more comfortable, knowing more people. It's really important. Visibility. I love starting to see some shows that are including transgender folks, but we live in a time right now that it can be very scary for transgender folks as well. So we have to recognize that. And educating those who are providing services. The study participants talked about being, whether it was at a shelter, whether it was at a health provider, a mental health provider, whether it was, going for a job interview. There's still a lot of stigma and discrimination here. And if we have more accessible and affirming care environments, which I'm going to talk more about, and also recognizing if someone is in front of you, like that person who came to your book study, the people who may come to your events, recognizing it takes some courage to be there. And they've probably been through quite a bit to be there. Recognizing that and communicating these sources, the resources that are available for folks is so important, because a lot of the folks that I talked with, they really talked about, I just didn't know these services were available. If I would have known about this even a couple months earlier, this would have helped me not experience housing instability. Because we know that for this age group, the longer they experience housing instability, health goes down the tubes. Physical and mental health go down very quickly, and the likelihood they're going to experience violence can as well. I would really talk about too, if accessible and affirming care practices wherever we are. Having open-ended questions like, tell me about your living situation. What pronouns do you prefer me to use? So many of the participants just said, even if you don't get my pronouns right, if you just ask, what pronouns would you prefer me to use? I feel so much more comfortable in your space. I'm not constantly on edge if I know you're trying. This recommended resource, I just put this in here. This has been really helpful for me. And I really think we need to recognize folks for not all of their, and I don't know, you guys probably don't do this as much in the mental health world. In the physical health world, we do a lot of looking at people from their deficits. And we really need to be thinking about how strong, how resilient, how forward focused a lot of these folks are, and think and be integrating more of that. And and I just want to say real quickly, with the institutional policies and practices, are we collecting data about how many folks who use our services identify as transgender or gender diverse? Because there's more of them out there than we recognize, because we don't always collect that data. And do we have safe places for people to go to the bathroom? All of those things. It's something to think about, and more research. And I think you guys shared these resources as well. As I talk about just getting resources out there. These are the first 5 are all national. They start really broad. They're national resources for this population, but then they will go down more specific to the area where people live or where they're currently residing. And they also will connect you with LGBTQIA plus friendly folks as well. I just checked because a couple months ago that I know some of these lines were down, but they're back up. They're up as of now. And I added JoCo Pride just and our Spot KC as also navigation centers a little more local. And I think of JoCo Pride, I've just had study participants say they really like that site with the community groups. And now I'm like, I need to put you guys on here too. And our Spot KC, they have a navigation center that kind of has that clubhouse model that Becky, you were talking about, that they're more in KC mode, but they do have a site that they actually have like a shelter for homeless folks. They have transitional housing, and they have like case managers too in Kansas City, Kansas. And I want to stop sharing and have time for, oh gosh, and it's 1 o'clock right now. But just follow up and questions. And I could talk, I told you at the start of this, I could talk about this for so long. There's just so much here, but I'm just happy to have this opportunity to share this information.
Any questions from anybody or comments from what you've heard?
This is Linda. Can you hear me?
I can.
Good. Shared resources is so important online. Is there another section that we could use, that we could create on our website that's just specifically for that has more information that you would suggest for us? Mary?
Well, that would just delight me to no end if you shared that on your website. I'm not sure, but are you asking like more resources to share on the?
You emphasized that shared resources were so important for these folks in an online setting where they could get everything all together. And that's one of the things that we always have emphasized is collection of resource information and making it easily available to folks when they come straight to our website. That's about,
Yes.
we speak to people in person quite a lot, but our website is always there 24 hours a day. So
yes, and the sources that I shared, that I did include their websites.
yes,
So,
and if you wanted to look at ours and make any suggestions for more resources that we could add, please do.
oh, okay, I will.
That's
Thank
what
you
I
so
mean
much.
on our website.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mary, because
Thank you.
two of my children are in Los Angeles, pardon me. And as I walk down the street, there are so many people living in cars and recreational vehicles and regular vehicles and campsites. It's much more than we ever see here. And so many of those folks, you know what the statistics are of how many of them are these folks that we've been talking about today.
Yes, yes.
And if there's anything we can do to bring these children back indoors and help them
Yes.
get a home, I can't think of anything better that we could do in the world.
Yes, no, I 100% agree, Linda. Thank you for sharing that and asking that question, because quite a few you know, again, this was a smaller study. It's a smaller qualitative study, but I can't tell you how many people were just like, if I would have just known about this, if this could have just been shared. Um, and I would say too, even, you know, I think of one study participant who said to me, there was they said, you know, I looked okay on the outside. I was not okay on the inside. And, you know, so I looked like I was maintaining, but I wasn't. And it's really made me aware, even at where I work, you know, at our school, how are we sharing resources with our students? How are we, you know, if it's whether I think of first gen students, I think of all of those things. So, and I would say too, even if you have a meeting space, to potentially have them posted physically in the meeting space too, in case someone is at a point where they don't have their
Right.
phone for a bit, because I've had those folks as well. But yes, I'd be happy to. I'll look over your site. Thank you.
Thank you. That'd be great. What else?
What else?
Pride Haven closed. What can we do to support any place that to take its place?
So I would say
Anything come
that
up?
so so sad. And I think that what happened, their funding had stopped momentarily. And then I think with the change, because they're part of Save Inc., which is a much larger organization. And I think then they have had a hard time getting the monies together now in our current environment with funding and that sort of thing. So our Spot KC did kind of step in and expand their programs. And I'm more familiar with KC, Kansas City, Missouri. But I know that our Spot also has a presence in Kansas City, Kansas. I don't know as much about Johnson County, but our Spot KC, they have they basically they have a location that you can come in, and they have case managers and therapists and that sort of thing, and you know, peer groups, that they have that. But then they also have two they have housing shelters. They're called the Lion House. And they also have transitional housing, you know, like kind of a step down.
They do?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
And Mary, is that R like OUR or R
Yes,
R spot? Okay.
it is. It's OUR. Our
Okay.
Spot KC.
Okay.
So we can look up doing some support for them.
Gosh, you guys are just making my heart so happy. This is
Well, I have multiple people in my family who are queer and have all kinds of definitions. And we have been so patting ourselves on the back for so many years for being so understanding and welcoming and accepting. And what have we done to help anybody else? What have we done? Not much. We better learn
Well,
about this for the others.
it's just awareness. And again, with all those different factors, it's when they all come together, all those social determinants of health together can put you in a really, really dark place very quickly. Yeah.
I'm sure.
And if you
Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
You go ahead. You go ahead. I've been talking.
No. I lost what I was going to say there. You go on.
I would just say I have been overwhelmed by the insights and the perspectives, and I don't know if this comes from resiliency, but so impressed by the study population. You would do whatever you could that they could move along in their paths and live the lives that they would like to be living and that they're working towards. So it's an investment in a very resilient population. And seriously, I would just think, are you 20 years old? You sound like you're 42. You know, just so.
Well, they know so much more these days than we ever did.
That's true too.
I'm really old. And when we were in high school, I didn't even know homosexuality existed. What an eye-opening concept. It was just
Right.
unbelievable. And then to think that I would grow up and one of my children would be one of those people. was unthinkable. It was unthinkable. And more of my friends, my relatives, grandchildren are coming up, boy, one after another are not non-binary.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, it's an epidemic. But you, Mary, you don't believe it's an epidemic at all?
No, I think people are having like culturally accepted language that they can actually use, and they aren't put in boxes. And this still, I mean, there's still a lot of bias and discrimination here, but I think when you start having language that you can use to describe yourself, that helps a lot. That helps a lot.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure.
And honestly, like when you would look at, it used to be before in 2022, the Gallup poll, you know, they have large national surveys and they recognize that for uh, it was folks 30 and younger, 20% of that population of 30 and younger identified as LGBTQIA plus. And they were like, what? We thought it was
Wow.
always between 6 and 8%. If you asked anyone before then, they would say it's between 6 and 8% with this
Yes.
younger group. So I think there that people so I think there have been a lot more for a long time that we just haven't recognized, and we've seen a lot of mental health issues come out of that, with people not being able to live who they feel like they really are. And I mean, that's my perspective from that. That's my, you know, I don't have any large studies to back that up from, but I feel like people are having language and places and spaces that they can talk about who they are.
We not only didn't know about it, we never ever considered that there was any option for who we were defined as at birth.
Right.
You couldn't change your name
Right.
if you felt like it. I mean, it was a big procedure. You could, but these kids, and my best friend's granddaughter just the other day said, nope, not that name anymore. And everybody went, sure, okay, this is your new name. It's so common that many, I'm sure there are many families that will walk right along your path with you because they pride themselves in being liberal and progressive and understanding, which goes along with the concept of being, I'm educated. I understand that there are different things going on in the world besides in my little box.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Make you feel better about yourself, but you really need to get out and do some work for others.
Right. Oh, I
Right.
know. I hear
Right.
you.
Mary, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to give us, I think, some food for thought, things to just think about. And as Linda has just brought up so many things, and then what that whole next question, what do we do? You know, what's our responsibility? What do we do? So it's so important. So we really appreciate your time today.
Well, I so appreciate being able to come today. I appreciate the platform, and you guys have given me encouragement, really. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Good luck with your program, with your doctoral program. I hope it all comes out just perfectly for you.
I do too. Fingers
There's
crossed.
there's no doubt. I'm not worried. I'm not, as I've told you all along, I'm not worried, Mary. This will be,
Okay,
so thank
good.
you. We're
You
really,
bet.
really
Thank
Thanks so
you
much,
all.
Mary.
yeah.
Take
You bet.
care.
Take care.
Thank you.